course, this is a segment with my phenomenal co-host, the one, the only Cora Masters-Berry. Good evening, Miss Berry. How are you?
Good evening. And it's nice to be with you at the seat under the table, which is what you just said.
Seat at the table. All right. With nothing new under the sun, though. So
nothing new under the sun, even though we have a seat at the table.
All
But
right.
I'm happy to be here. I'm not here for long, but I woke up this morning with Georgia on my mind.
Yeah.
And we had a show that I want to talk to you all about, that I want you to watch. But like many of you, I had to come down from the joy of electing former Vice President Joe Biden, and of course the next president of the United States, although I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, Kamala Harris. My attention is all on Georgia. There are many organizations based in Georgia who have been doing the work that made it possible for Biden to turn that state blue. As I speak to the leaders and donors in that progressive movement, I am consistently hearing two things. We want to help and we are resource strapped. So this show is to go back over what Latasha Brown, who's head of Black Voters Matter, and now I'm sorry, Melanie Campbell, who is over the National Coalition for Black Participation and the Black Women's Roundtable, because none of us could have been prepared for this situation in this moment. So it is my honor and my responsibility, actually, to lift up a few Black women led organizations in Georgia who are doing the work. They are both C3 efforts. And for those of you who don't understand that, that's just a designation that gives you an opportunity or the ability or the freedom to do some partisan work. And they are both, those are interested in giving and giving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up an opportunity for you to
support,
look at the link and donate to an organization called Georgia Stand Up, and it's led by Deborah Scott. It's a Georgia Alliance of leaders that represent community, faith, academic, and labor organizations that organize and educate communities about issues related to economic development. Georgia Stand Up operates a virtual, phenomenal phone bank and text bank, as well as targeted canvas and lift drop operations focused on turning out Black women. So this is, can we see that? Is that big enough? Georgia Stand Up? Can they see it? I can't see how you can get the link. And there's going to come up and you're going to see that you can donate it on a certain link. And there's also volunteers as a group. There it is. Donate to Georgia Stand Up. Contribution rules. They give you all the rules. I'm looking for the link.
Show one more time, Ashley, so we can see the exact link. That was great.
Because it's a Secure Act Blue. Donate Georgia Stand Up. Okay. I still don't see the link. I see the amounts.
She's showing the link there.
Okay, I don't see it. So if I don't see it, I don't know who else does. But anyway, you can go up and look for Georgia Stand Up. And you can also look for another organization that's called Black Voters Matter Fund. And you can look at one other organization called the New Georgia Project. And you look up those and donate to them. I would like it to go up on the screen before or after the show is run. And what is on the show is amazing information. I had Latasha Brown on the show, and I had Melanie Campbell. Latasha Brown runs and is head of Black Voters Matter, and Melanie Campbell runs and has headed up for many years at Black Participation, Coalition of Black Voter Participation, as well as Black Women's Roundtable. And between those two women, if there's anything you need to know about what's going on in Georgia, what is the different organizations that are participating, what they have done, and what their plans are to win this election, which is the Senate election that will give what I call Biden, if we win these 2 seats, it'll give Biden what I call a no excuse administration. In other words, he won't be able to use the Senate as an excuse to do what he needs to do for our people. So I want to get those 2 people in there so he has the vote. And so then we can leverage our power and our help. And we're the ones that took him over the line twice. And so we ought to be able to make demands without excuses that he can't get it through the Congress. So I call it a no excuse vote. So if you're going to vote, you don't have to like either one of these 2 people. I'm speaking to somebody in particular. You don't have to like their politics. You don't even have to like the fact that they don't advertise with the Black community. But if you want something out of the I don't know what's wrong with this man over here shaking his head. He needs help, y'all. Pray for him. Vote and donate to these 2 groups. Black Voters Matter, Stand Up Georgia, New Georgia Project. Please give them money. And the next thing that I want to say before I get off the show, or for this evening so you can watch the show, is next week we're going to do a show on the anniversary of the death of Marion S. Berry Jr., who was the mayor of Washington, D.C., but more of a national figure because he was in the business of empowering our people at a time when it was right after the 1965 Civil Rights Voting Rights Act passed, and we saw a plethora of Black mayors, Cleveland, Gary, Indiana, Maynard Jackson in Atlanta, Marion Barry, Carl Stokes in Cleveland, all of those people. And what they did, or at least what Marion did in Marion and Maynard, is they bought in and ushered in a time of empowering and uplifting Black people economically, not with a whole bunch of services, those 2, but also giving people, fish. They say you could either, I can give you the fish or I can teach you how to fish. He taught them how to fish. And so we're going to do a show about what he has done to make a whole lot of Black people rich. A lot of people out there don't know that, but we're going to educate you and inform you. What you think about that? Do you know anything about that, Munson?
Of course. Being here in Atlanta, Maynard Jackson was key in making sure that we had an Office of Contract Compliance, and that's for everything. That's from public finance, bond deals, the works, to pouring cement and carrying, and making sure that people got employed. So the city did a great job during that era of hiring our people so that they had pensions. I can say the same for, obviously, Mayor Marion Barry. He was committed to the community to make sure that they saw some reciprocity in a place that they worked, paid their taxes, and lived.
Yeah, I agree. I did, when they did a statue of Marion, I want to get into it too much because we're going to talk about it next week. But when they did a statue, I wanted to have John Lewis and Andy Young to come, but both of them were committed. That was the weekend of Selma. Every year Black folks go down to Selma and relive the misery. But so that's what they were doing. So they did it.
Photo ops.
Photo ops. I can't handle it. But the bottom line is that one of the things that John Lewis said that stayed with me, and maybe it was Andy Young, I don't know which one, but they both said great things because Marion preceded John Lewis and was his mentor, so to speak. And Andy Young was with SCLC. And so, John Lewis bounced between SNCC and SCLC. But he said Marion taught what he found out, what he learned in the movement, he took it into government and made a transition. So he Black power. And that's what he did. And we're going to talk about that because you're going to be surprised at some of the people stories about how he empowered this a lot of Black people. And I'll just give you a little quick hint. I don't think most people know that if it wasn't for Marion Barry, there would be no Bob Johnson. So I'll leave it at that.
Founder of BET, you guys, Bob Johnson.
Mm-hmm. And the one who voted for Trump. He said that I didn't. So that's it for me for this show. I'm anxious to watch the show from last week because all the Georgia stuff is in that show.
All right, everybody, this has been Nothing New Under the Sun. Enjoy the Georgia recap and donate to all the organizations. Their links are on the show description as well. So you can support these organizations. They're on the ground. They're led by some phenomenal women. This is Nothing New in the Sun, which is always intergenerational. Enjoy this, and we'll see you next week for the Marion Berry special. Marion Berry special with Nothing New Under the Sun. And I'm still debating on whether I'm going to do what you asked.
No excuses.
No.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. Nothing New Under the Sun. Scar Berry, we'll see you later. But enjoy this. It's very informative and will give you insight into what's really happening in Georgia today. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Munson Steed, and welcome to A Seat at the Table. But of course, this is Nothing New Under the Sun, which is intergenerational communication and consideration for all those things that we do and don't know about ourselves, and inspiration for knowing what you should do, given the fact that this is a moment in history. And we hope that you're making history. Our wonderful co-host, or my co-host, which I am so proud to say, Ms. Cora Masters Berry has brought to the awareness of our entire community what women are doing in this movement, but more importantly, what women have always done in this movement. Not from behind, but actually out front. We just were not paying attention. So now that we know that and we're honest about that, this is the moment where we're meeting some of those additional young, true leaders who are not only empowering our community, but empowering our awareness and cultivating a power within ourselves that we never imagined that young women would be doing. Collectively, we have Latasha Brown tonight. And Latasha, we'd like to welcome you to Nothing New Under the Sun. Good evening, ladies. How are you both?
Thank you for having me. It's a good day to be alive.
Well, Latasha, you look lovely. And thank you for joining us. I am so happy to have you join us in Nothing New Under the Sun. Many of the sisters that we talk with, we work with, we collaborate with, have been on the show. The Color Girls have been on the show, different ones. And he's right. There's a whole demographic of people out there who need to know who we are and what we're doing. You, for one, is one of the powerhouses. It's an intergenerational show, and you are in a generation that is actually and literally changing the world. Mm-hmm. And what makes it so special is not only are you changing the world, but you're leading a lot of those changes. I mean, I'm going to tell the audience, but I think you can tell them better. Where are you located? Where is your base?
My base is Georgia. I'm in sweet, sweet Georgia. But
that's
please
right.
know that I am from the great state. And even tonight, actually, I'm in Selma, Alabama, which I am a native of. And so I came to see my family, but I am, my work and my base is in Georgia. And so all eyes are on Georgia right now. But what I will say is it started from this little city I'm in right now, Selma, Alabama.
Well, everybody knows where Selma is, but you are sitting. The reason I asked you that question is because I would say, you know, what it said, the midnight train to Georgia.
The midnight.
Any song you can think of, all eyes are on Georgia. Georgia is the epicenter. Georgia is the future. Without Georgia, we were going to be in trouble. I can go on and on and on. So to have you here to tell us what's going on in Georgia, what are we to expect? Can we do what you all did before? Who are the people that are doing it? And what is the game plan between now and January, or even now and sometime in December and early voting? I'm just very fascinated with it. I'm obviously very attentive to it because, well, I love politics. I get people out to vote, but we've been doing some very, very powerful things. So I want you to start telling us what we can do, what y'all doing, and what's the 411. Before we get to that, I want to welcome Melanie. our leader of the coalition.
Hey,
Welcome to the show.
hello. I'm gonna say happy birthday again to my sister.
Thank you.
Yes. So
Well,
it's like,
she's powerful. So I was just asking her, since you from Atlanta, we're gonna talk tonight. I just want y'all to just tell everybody what's going on. Latasha, you want to start?
I do. I want to, just to shout out the folks around Georgia. We have been saying this. It's really been deep organizing and really has been led by Black women. Black women for the last decade. Really, and Melanie, I know she's going to come on and talk, but Melanie has been one of those sisters who, when there were no other national organizations that would invest in us in Georgia, that would see our leadership, that just thought we were another red state, Melanie Campbell would support me and Helen Butler and Felicia Davis and Deborah Scott. And so I'm raising that because I also want to say that I'm glad people, some of the other national groups have discovered us, but there's been some sisters that have been taking care of us and literally plugging into us, the entire time because they knew the potential that was there. And so in Georgia, what we see in Georgia happened over time, that we're thinking that it didn't just happen on this election cycle. It has been deep organized when everybody would write the state off. That state, people have to know that Georgia has not voted blue in 27 years, right? And so here it is that we were able to shift that state based on the hard work and dedication of primarily led by Black women, Black people, but primarily led by Black people. And part of it has been, Cora, how they always have this for a period, people were saying literally in philanthropy that organizing didn't work. If you didn't have some technology on the van, and it was like everything had to be about putting some technology with some white guys in Silicon Valley had developed, and everybody's supposed to use that program and abandon organizing. And some of us, without resources, continued to do that organizing, without really being able to have the support, said we're going to continue to do that, and it's paid off. That at the end of the day, it's really that relationships matter. And so I would certainly say in the last 10 years that's been organized, but particularly in the last 2 years, it's been intense. I think it's really poetic justice that the place that was ground zero for voter suppression for Black folk is the very place that is helping to deliver, right, this whole nation and shift. Just think about that. I'm like, I know we talking about politics, but I'm talking about spirit. Like,
that's right.
God's something else, ain't it? Right. Here it is in this very nation that has ignored us when we've been saying about voter suppression, that has ignored that thousands of people in Georgia were kicked off the voting rolls. Matter of fact, as late as last year, October of 2019, Raffensperger, who is the Secretary of the State of Georgia, kicked off 328,000 people on the voting rolls. 200,000 of the 328,000 never should have been kicked off, right? Guess who those folks were? They looked like me and you. They were us. And so fundamentally, what even this year, we worked with investigative journalist Greg Pallas and a team of experts that checked the data. And these are people who do data mining and data lists for Amazon and Microsoft and the Fortune 500 companies. 200,000 of those names that were cross-checked over 200 times never should have been dropped off. And the tragedy is that if they did not re-register, where they never should have been dropped off, by October the 5th, they were denied the opportunity to vote. So I'm saying, I'm just setting it up for people to recognize that here a state that has been egregious in voter suppression is now the state that this country is leaning on to deliver, right? As my grandmama used to say in the scripture, the last will be first and the first will be last. And so I'm raising that because as long as voter suppression was a Black thing, those of us who have been working in Alabama and Mississippi and other places for years screaming this, that it was, it's isolated. But if we haven't seen right now how the fate of this country is tied into the fate of Black folk, right? If we don't know, they showed up and we showed out. And so in spite of the voter suppression, right, in spite of all of those barriers, what we've been seeing is organizations on the ground who have been working in a coordinated fashion. In the last 5 years, what I will say is there's been the establishment of a table, a pro-Georgia table, a C3 table that have pulled groups together so they can do some coordination. You got groups like New Georgia Project that has registered over 800,000 new voters. But you have the Georgia Coalition on the People's Agenda, led by Helen Butler, that has been doing that work for years and literally being a convener of many of the coalition groups. You also have groups like Georgia Stand Up that has been doing neighborhood, local-based work. So a lot of the work they've been doing is around local elections, particularly in the metro Atlanta area. Then you have other groups of the domestic workers, Sister Song, some of the other nonprofit social justice groups that normally don't do voter registration work or voter engagement work that have been doing work as well. And so Black Voters Matter, the work that we decided to do is that what we wanted to build the power in the Black Belt. That part of what has happened traditionally is that there's been some investment in the metro area, but not necessarily in the Black Belt. And so at the end, when they were calling Clayton County and Chatham and Dougherty County, we weren't worried. You know why? Because we've been down there. That's where we were. And so fundamentally, what we've been doing is over the last 3 years, 4 years, very deeply, working in a third of the counties where Black people are 20% or more. And our model is a little different. Our model is instead of and everybody has just been playing their role. Our model is to support grassroots local groups. And so what we've been doing is we've been supporting local groups in local elections throughout the last 3 or 4 years. When you show up for folks, they will show up for you. And so it's hard to get
now. Let me hit you at that point.
That's right.
I am so glad that you are teaching, because I'm a political scientist and I know that you have to organize. And I know this thing takes a time before it bubbles to the top. I know no miracle took place. I know all these people were already harvesting this situation. And I will say, not only has it taken a lot of organizing, but it is not in spite of voter suppression. I always teach that it's because of voter suppression. Right. It was voter suppression that mobilized and got people upset and determined that they would vote. So over and above, they were voting on their local officials. They were, maybe might vote, may not vote, but the more they pushed against us, is the more we push back.
That's right.
And the other thing that I saw watching this parade, nobody's talking about, or maybe I haven't heard it because I'm guilty of not listening and watching TV all the time. But I also want to say something about the protest.
That's right.
And I was watching the calculation of the Trump people saying that these rallies would represent thousands and thousands of millions of people, not just the people there, but the people that they knew. And all this was going to gin up the vote, and this was what was going to win. And they were right. They were absolutely right. If it had not been for George Floyd.
That's right.
When those people got in the street and stayed in the street for 3 months, they went to the polls. So that also generated the interest and the determination. What do you think, Melanie?
I think it was a tsunami of things that happened.
Right.
All of the work that one we didn't have to start from scratch. It was already there. Never left. Never left. With the infrastructure, what's on the ground, and then being a daughter of the South, even if people want to say Florida, not the South, it is. If you don't know it now, you know it in the last couple of years.
Now you know it.
South Florida really is, right? Coming from Mims, Florida, where I come from. And so that was already there. And then we know voter suppression, they've been suppressing us for the whole time we've been in this country. So and utilizing that vote as a way to keep us suppressed, right? But then they go overboard, as they always do. Always go overboard, right? And then when that drumbeat gets to going in our community, see, we ain't gonna tell you everything we're doing. Right, you don't want the enemy to know everything. So I think what was happening in the South, right, is even though Trump may have won Florida, right, they had to steal some votes in how they dealt with Amendment 4 down in Florida. That's I know we here to talk about Georgia, but that had a major impact. All those folks would have been on the rolls. So they constantly figure out how they're going to win the next election by continuously figuring out how they're going to stop Black folk from voting and keeping us down. But I don't think, I think that they gone too far. I know that everybody flying in, driving in, swimming in, whatever they can do to deal with Georgia. So y'all gonna have that, y'all got that problem, Latasha. Y'all got to is everybody knows that Georgia will save this democracy.
Georgia's on their mind.
They know it now. Well, what the hell they doing up here? It's like, come on now, we better pay attention. And I think folks are, right? But also, I also think the enemy never sleeps. I know they got some tricks up their sleeve. So we got to be communicating and connecting and finding out where the enemy is going to be trying to take us down in this what, 70 days or whatever days we got left for this. Before
But you know what, Latasha, I heard all the people you named, and I knew those people existed. And then there's some other organizations. And I say this with the most generous spirit, but all I hear and all the press hears is Stacey Abrams. Now, I know she did a yeoman's job, and I'm really proud of her, and I think she made a big difference. But there's so many other organizations and people who were very much toiling in the vineyard, even though, like George Floyd, I think Stacey Abrams' experience of actually literally having the election stolen from her by purging the voter rolls and doing all, when the man who was running against her was also the person who was running the election. He had no choice but to win. So, but that also was a motivating factor and being able to get people interested because something had been stolen. But I would like to know, what do you think her major role was, or her organization's major role is, getting the votes in conjunction with all the other organizations that you all have talked about? Because I know Melanie had organizations on the ground. I know the coalition and the Black Women's Roundtable had people on the ground. And they've been, like you said, Latasha, they've been having them for years.
That's right.
So what's your assessment of that, Latasha?
So my assessment of that is there have been groups that have been doing work on the ground for years. There are groups that are doing great work that actually added to this, but no one can deny that what Stacey was is catalytic. That her campaign, it was like a lightning rod.
That's
like
right.
You can say what you want, but the bottom line is, I do think that with her campaign, first of all, you have a Black woman in the South have the audacity to run for governor. That everybody says she was crazy. Not necessarily local folks, but folks like, she ain't gonna raise enough money. She don't have the profile of what you should be to be. Matter of fact, there was a sizable, if we're gonna tell the truth and shame the devil, there was a sizable amount of Black electeds within the state of Georgia that did not support her and it came out against her and supported the white Stacey, right? We're gonna tell the truth and shame the devil. And she beat her like she stole something. And the reason why is because she had infrastructure. What Stacey understands is that Stacey created an infrastructure around what her agenda was, right? And she created an organization that could support that. And then also I think New Georgia Project, in terms of the scale in which they did the voter registration, absolutely, there's no doubt that they actually played a part in the process. It's almost as what Melanie is saying. We think that it has to be one or the other. It don't have to be one or the other. Like what sometimes I think the white media does is it decides it's gonna pick. It's kind of like the civil rights movement, right? If you didn't know any better, you just think it was Dr. King. Right, all them other folks were just following Dr. King, right? You don't hear about Amelia Boynton, you don't hear about Marie Foster, you don't hear about Dorothy Height, you don't hear about those folks who are part of the process. And so that's part of the media's narrative, right? But the truth of the matter is,
gets permission. They decide who of our people are they going to allow to get the most oxygen. They
decide that. And listen, I also know that I get a tremendous amount of media attention right now. Part of it. And so even that, I'm always trying to use the platform to be able to lift up sisters and other folks. At the end of the day, though, I will say, listen, now I got street cred. I've been in this game for 27 years, so I ain't about to apologize that somebody just discovered the work. But the bottom line is, it is always a collective work. One person cannot do it, and so I don't even think that that's but we also have to be that. Oftentimes, it's almost like the tipping point. It takes something to catalyze, to make a movement, gel and pull forth. There is no question. The kind of energy that was around Stacey's, I was there, I was on the ground. Gubernatorial campaign, I've not seen that since I've been in Georgia. I just ain't.
Mhm.
Right. I've not seen that. And what was wonderful is even what I loved about what I felt like even the Black community, that even those folks who were not supportive of the campaign, initially they saw it bigger. They made it bigger than Stacey. They saw that this was an effort around literally Black people working together to push an agenda. And so what I say to that is Stacey deserves her flowers. Stacey deserves her credit. There's no doubt for me, right? And so along with that, recognizing that it actually, and we also had to take the opportunity to lift up the other sisters that laid the foundation, even for Stacey, that laid the fertile ground for Stacey's seeds to plant, to grow. And so I think it's a collective piece. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm excited that to see this sister get the kind of shine she's getting right now. I'm excited to have the conversations that are having, but I think we do have to control the narrative, even in the media, to really recognize this is a collective effort. And at the end of the day, it's really the grassroots folk. It's the people that we don't know their name.
How are we going to convert that, Melanie and Latasha, into the next 75 days? How are we going to turn that into another victory? Is there organizations that are you all having some kind of organization where everybody's seeing what everybody else? I mean, what's going on? What's happening?
I think a lot of that was happening in the all year, right?
It's been happening.
Really, and really in 18.
That's right.
The key is to knowing it was already there, but then 18, how it catalyzed. And y'all know how I've known Stacey since she was, student when I worked for Maynard. She was one of my, so just to see her blossom, right? But the thing that we always have to be careful of is that we do need a big tent. Why? Because if you narrow it and then say nothing else is there, then they
take that one out, then we done.
So it's always important to have that whole ecosystem.
That's right.
Because Black women, we and Cora, we stand on shoulders, right? We stand on the shoulders. We stand on your shoulders. We stand on all the sisters' shoulders and brothers' whose shoulders the Reverend James Oranges of the world. I was watching y'all last night with Helen and some of them on John Taylor and them on the phone, and I'm like, I started to say, let me in this conversation, right? Because at the end of the day, it takes us being able to make sure you can't figure out which one or two, or three for that matter. And we have to have that kind of strategy. And the movement, there's no movement. And when you talked about, when we connected up down in Selma, right? And so it is about continuation of that movement, and we have to keep bringing on new people, bringing on new ideas, right, and support, and keep making sure, because what I don't like in the progressive space is when you pick winners and losers.
I agree.
Infrastructures get weak. And part of what happened when they moved to 2000 with that doggone 17 battleground strategy, that was one of the worst things from a national perspective that the Democrats did, because they just left the South alone, if you recall, and a lot of other states. And so that's part of the problem. That right. As far as and the Democratic Party is not the savior of us all, but many of us are what? Democrats too, right? So the reality of how that played out and how our organizations, when I moved to Washington, D.C., voter education project was still alive. When I left Atlanta, it was still alive. And being young in the movement, I met you, Cora, a couple of days after I got in town for the Million Man March, and how we worked to do that work. She pulled me out of the corner. I can say, I want her to, so go that reality, seeing voter education project die because of the foundations. They don't give me no money anymore, so I don't care. Ford Foundation did not fund that organization when there was a need to keep putting.
That's right.
That's when the National Coalition, our organization, got more active in the South.
That's right.
Right.
This
parachute in there. It was like there was this void. And now, Latasha, that's when we kind of connected down there in Selma, in Alabama. And when Rose and Hank were doing Operation Big Vote, right? And all of those things. And so that long-term picture of long-term building power and sustaining that power, It's something I know we gotta, when we get a chance to catch our breath and be in the space, because everything can't be on this technology where people can find out what you're doing. We got to be in some rooms where we don't have that problem and look at that 20-year strategy, because that's part of it. Because I think what's happening now is the notion that people will decide that minority rule. How do we keep a minority of people, keeping everybody else in control? So we got to tear this sucker down and let the democracy crumble so that certain people can control it politically, so they can control it economically. That's what I see happening. That nothing they're doing is an accident. Nothing. It's not just the Georgia race, as important as it is, right? It is, how can we restructure what this is so that we stay, a certain ilk of white male stays in a power position.
That's right.
And they would do anything. They're thinking about their grandkids and their great grandkids and how they keep that in place.
That's right.
Black women, we are now in the position, because we are saying we're going to own our power to fight back against that with our brothers, of course, and bring y'all.
Here's the thing, though. The dynamic, the political dynamic that's going on with how we have structured these, and I want to get back to Georgia because I want to know what we're going to do, but I want to just talk right now about my political science stuff is coming out in me now, and I'm watching this how they're structuring this with battleground states and the whole efficacy of why we have electoral college. The details on that would really surprise everybody. I'm not going to do this. Is not going to be my class tonight. But that strategy, that battleground strategy right now is in the hands of Black people.
That's right.
True.
If they want to do that and we can keep that level of intense interest, they're going to change the strategy, because Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Detroit brought home the bacon.
Without question.
So that strategy didn't quite work. And if we stay like we can motivate, like you say, and like we all say, our people, and connect their voting to their condition and show them some results. If we can keep them in that connection, we're in charge.
Right. And I do want to say, Cora, I do think that part of it, because I know that's been our approach. We haven't been waiting on the presidential election to do work. What is so frustrating is what sometimes what will happen with the cycle, and I know because Melanie has been dealing with, we've been frustrated with this for years, is what I call the round the Negroes up period. That is 3 weeks right before the election, and they drop some resources. We're supposed to run and get folk, together. And so in spite of them, because we recognize that our community needs a firewall, that we need to reduce the harm, we have been doing work 365 days out of the year, all the organizations that are on the front lines. And so with a fraction of the resources that some of these new groups, or these new or white-led or groups that somebody came up with in New York have had. And so what I think part of the key, which has led to those victories, even in those places, is that there has been a growth of local infrastructure in those places around. It's the local folks that are anchoring. Like, it was not the party coming in that delivered Philadelphia. The folks in Philadelphia delivered that. The indigenous leadership, a lot of that leadership actually came out of the movement. A lot of that leadership was some young folks. The young woman who worked with us is under 30, and she's 27 years old, right? And so I'm saying that there is I think there's two things that are happening that are shifting the political paradigm. One, I think that there is an infusion of some new, some new folks, some new leaders also working with some of the traditional organizations. We can't afford to give up either. Like, a lot of times philanthropy will try to play one over the other. That's problematic. We need the institutional knowledge of the organizations that have been there, and the wisdom of those organizations, and the anchoring. And we also need new organizations as well that can also bring and feed in as a pipeline and feed in new leadership. We need both. It's not an either or. I think the second thing is that there is a new coalition of people that are organizing themselves. Like it was indigenous folks out over on the West Coast. It was indigenous folks and our Mexican brothers and sisters out in Arizona that was taking care of business in Arizona and Nevada.
That's right.
I am raising, it was Black folk. Even when you look at Georgia, there's a new coalition of folks from the LGBTQ community, from the Asian American community, for the Black community, from the Latinx community, from white progressive community, or even white moderates. What's interesting is oftentimes they will marginalize Black leadership, that the only people we can move is Black folks. No, that's not true. Most of the time when you see these coalitions, we have been, in my opinion, the most inclusive organizers at the table. Like we have literally been very inclusive of building these broad-based coalitions. And so
we had to.
Because
we had to. There was only, I mean, in the South, it was imperative. You had to have that white support. They came down from the North. They marched. They gave money. That's how you get there, because we didn't have the awareness and the power to get our people understanding how powerful they were. And in the North, you had a lot of us who didn't involve Black people, white people at all, and they killed all of us. They marginalized us, they criminalized us, and they exiled us. So this coalition that's going on now, it's I think you're right. It's organic. A lot of these, I mean, we've always had organizational coalitions, but back to the protesters, I'm not going to not talk about these protests. Right. Because everybody was saying these protests was creating an opportunity for the opposition to say, look, law and order, the people are all out of control. And some of that did happen. But what happened that was bigger was that movement gelled. That's right. And they didn't just, they didn't just protest and then go home. They protested and went to the polls. Oh, that's right. And even though we were the leading demographic because of where they were located, but what shored up that demographic were all them. I tell the story, and I think I've told it. They did an interview with these in Yorktown, Atlanta. 3 white girls sitting in one of the parks. They're freshmen. They were giddy because they had voted for the first time, and they were excited. And they were 18 years old, and they had been protesting. And the guy asked them. He said, "Well, why? What are you voting for?" And they said, "We're voting for justice, and we're voting for equity." And I'm like, look at them. And then they had a sign, and you know what the sign said? F your white privilege. Now, these are white kids. And so that was part of that coalition too. So I don't want that to be left out of the narrative. That's right. Because the way they were yelling, and so we lost some votes, but we gained a lot more from those. That elevated it. It elevated.
My thing about this whole, what the Democrats tend to do, well, you did this for us, but you made us lose that, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, a lot of the districts they wasn't gonna hold no way. So I don't know who was running the DCCC, but they need to figure out. They need to go to that conversation to figure out how y'all got y'all numbers mixed up. But a lot of districts were red districts, and so you got the president that they love, some of them, right? They're gonna vote right along with that person and Democrat. I'm not saying that's all of it, but at the end of the day, you can't tell me how great we made this victory, but then I made you lose something at the same time. That's just schizophrenic, and we cannot allow that. They can figure that story out somewhere else.
Yeah, we ain't taking no blame. We're taking all the damn glory on this.
We are, and
this is a Black thing.
I think that there's it's beyond that. I think that there's something very manipulative in that in the first place. The truth of the matter is, we have gone through that strategy. Don't piss off the white folk that ain't showed up in 28 years. Right. They ain't showed up in 28 years. You're pulled consistently. Yeah. They supported these conservative or moderate Democratic candidates with this idea that some way these moderate Democratic whites were going to pull people to the tickets. They ain't pulled them yet.
Not yet.
27 years. But if you can go back and you can look at what Andrew Gillum did in Florida, who was a progressive Black candidate, there were more folks that participated in that ticket in Florida's history, right? When you look at what Stacey did in Stacey's race, there were more folks that participated that in the history of the state, that pulled in the history of the Democratic Party on that ticket. If you go back and look at Mike Espy, he got more votes than anybody since 1972. The bottom line, if you go look at Beto O'Rourke, the evidence is that the South is shifting and there is an appetite for progressive candidates. There is a fear factor on let's not isolate the white moderate that don't show up. Right. And so I use it as an analogy like a basketball game. If I'm at a basketball game and I got two players and I got one and we down 2 points and I got one player that shoots 50%, right? And I got one player that shoots 90%. Guess who I'm gonna put in the game? I'm gonna bet on my 90%. Right. And so but what we keep seeing happening, even with the party, is even there's a narrative going around now, even about South Carolina that I want to deal with. And I know we're talking about Georgia, but not in South Carolina, saying that in some ways, this progressive, the defund the police, like actually isolated folks in South Carolina. But guess what? They got a black sheriff that won. So something ain't right. So at the end of the day, literally they were able to switch, right, and make a major shift in a place that they've never been able, which means that it works, right? At the end, and I think it's enough burden for black folks on its own. Then now we got to carry the burden of white folk not showing up, right? And I think part of that is in the psyche of, like, in some way, like white folks' ice is colder. That in some way, like a white vote, like they are just obsessed with this white vote that has shown that it's not going to go with them, right? There are some whites, the progressive whites. We need a percentage of progressive whites without question, right? They're there. They can be nurtured. But those are the folks that are out there on the front lines at the protest with us.
So now you hearing what she's saying, and I see you over there smiling and nodding, Munson. It kind of reminds me of what you said when we talked about what we had to do to win Georgia in these next couple of months. And you said these people have to reach deeper into the community. They've just stopped at a certain level. So how will we be able to go and excavate the vote of people, all of our people in our communities? Now, that is something Trump did. He went all the way to Appalachia and Trailer Park. They were all voting, had never voted before. How do we go get those? We're gonna need every black vote available in Georgia to pull this off. So Munson, what do you think?
You're on mute, Munson.
I think it has to be a loud voice. And I think that we need to ask for more transparency in this party, particularly as it relates to budgeting, particularly as it relates to resources. We really can't afford to spend any more time ignoring our entire Black community. And I think that we've got to even counsel Black African Americans that will assume that street money, helping support Black churches, pastors, barbershops in our community is a problem. And we need to eliminate those individuals in our community from the real honest conversations of being able to win when they do not want to include every Black person in part of their program. So we see a lot going to TV, less going to Latasha. Why are we paying for TV? We done seen that commercial once. And we may not even, you might even alienate us because we don't care if the candidate likes a dog. At the end of the day, can I pay my light bill? Is my son going to be able to get out of jail? Or am I going to see you in my barbershop? Are you at the daycare center? Have you done something for the kids that are there? I'm more concerned with that. And I think that those are the things that aren't being really conversated when I read the New York Times articles. They're not talking about the real Black person that went out of his way, that didn't go to Yale, that didn't attend Spelman, but believed in what Stacey was saying. And they were motivated because of her Blackness.
I say absolute ditto. I think there's a larger, deeper analysis around, there is a consultant class of political consultants that swarm around the campaigns and oftentimes say, put all your money on TV. The funny thing is most folks I know watch cable or Netflix. People ain't watching network TV like that, right? And they'll put all of their money in an air war when we have consistently said, if you're going to beat or make a win to get Black voters, you have got to put money on the ground. It is a ground war. If you don't have ground troops, you can buy up all the airtime that you want, you can't move folks because there's a difference between somebody here in a commercial and Helen Butler, who's been working with them and providing resources when they need it or showing up when their child needs some support. There's a different kind of power that comes with relational organizing. And so that's why I think it's really important for us to really recognize that if we're going to win this, we've got to make sure that those groups that are embedded in communities in Georgia are well resourced.
So now,
right?
one of the things I want to know, like one of the things that I was very unhappy with in the national campaign was not using Black media. Are we going to be able to flood Black folks listen to the radio?
Listen, are we
going to be able to do that? Do we have some weekly newspapers right now? That we got like 5 opportunities to have all kind of stuff in there. What about the popular podcast that the people listen to? Are we going to the core of to the root of where we can reach our people in addition to whatever else we have to do? Is there any? That's one. What is the structure? What's going on? Who's in charge of that? Is somebody already? Is that covered? Is there money being raised for that? Who's doing what to make sure that we do what you said? Go to the very common denominator in our community. Melanie, Latasha, what's going on? What's going to happen?
So I can just tell you some preliminary things that are happening right now. And then there are groups that are, a lot of them from the C3 table to others. Many of us have been having phone calls ever since the election was. We haven't even taken a breather, right? We've been having phone calls to coordinate so that there's a coordinated campaign that is coming from those community groups. And so I'll be honest, out of the years that I've worked in Georgia, this is my personal experience. I've not seen groups work together as well as they work this time. Like I felt like there was a real and sincere interest for folks. People did what they did in their lane. Now, I think that there's some more resources that should have been on the ground. Right. I think the campaign did an awful job around radio, to be honest. I think we need to go hard on Black radio. I know that we as an organization, we have one fourth of our budget is going to go towards radio and plugging in the media and communications, right? That's a part of what we do. The second thing is I think that there are some organizations that will planning to do some work on the ground. I think there's going to be a need for more coordination that has already started around how we coordinate and how we divide. One of my fears, I'm gonna be honest, because in the last week I got maybe 100 texts, maybe today alone, of people saying they come down to Georgia, and I want to be like, no, like let the ground troops get it together, and you be reinforcement for us, right? But what a mistake,
and not just Metro Atlanta,
right?
Georgia.
So we are working to like literally
don't stop at the airport location,
right? But we don't need folks just flying down here and then it can create havoc.
Do you think getting some of these reaching? I know we've suffered from PTSD with the entertainment community, with the rappers and the Ice Cubes and the Jelly Beans and whatever else was going on. But we got to try to reach some people really, really quick. So I'm sitting there thinking, I don't need to fly down there. Although I was one of them people on my way down there, and I still might try to find my way down there. But I'm
not saying that
you got roots. You got roots there. You got roots down there.
Those people, can we get what's her name?
And I don't think that people shouldn't come. Let me say this, Cora. That's not what I'm saying.
I think it's capacity. I get that. But what about trying to get some of the people that really can reach our people in our deep communities?
We are we've got there part of even the collaborative, several of the groups that I know now are actually planning concerts with some of the local indigenous rappers that are down there, some of the people that are working down there. You know, what I will say is I certainly think that rappers and influencers have some influence, but I'm not convinced yet that they mobilize millions of folks. I think they help get the message out.
Right.
But you still have to have, what they do is they amplify something that's happening.
They put it on the screen. They put it on the radar.
Right. Mm-hmm. But it's still going to take the problem sometimes I think that campaigns will make is they collapse the two. They collapse the amplification of the message, also meaning that's going to be an automatic mobilization. That is not what happened.
No.
And never has been.
They are the tree shakers, and the organizations are the jelly makers.
That's right. But we haven't seen them approach that. We have not seen oftentimes the campaigns approach that. They will normally approach, they will collapse the two as if I already talked to this person. I got them on a couple of commercials and the black folks love them, they're going to come out. And you and I know that ain't how it works.
It's just not what happens. And then I can say, which we said a little bit earlier, that, especially the sisters that are leading these organizations are working more close. And it didn't just start it really didn't just start this year. What I'm concerned about is that resources flow.
That's right.
So that folks can continue to stuff that they had already built that can continue through January the 5th and beyond that, quite frankly. But that can especially in runoffs, right? And being able to utilize. I mean, the conversations I've been in with folks, folks are working together, and but then also just trying to get folks like all of us, like, where do I go? Who do I plug into? Well, let folks get the on-ramp ready for you, because you don't just show up and then you just got all these folks, and that we're strategic about it. And I think that people go, and I think it's a good thing, but not if it's all over the place. So, and my understanding is that that's happening a lot.
Who's the coordinator for this whole movement? Is there a coordinator?
I'm not gonna say it's one person, Cora. I'm not gonna say that.
Well, I mean, but is there somebody who's just sort of like putting everybody together?
Let me say that I think that there's different, because I do think we need to see how this win was bifurcated or maybe trifurcated. That there is a political level, right? Those are the political movers and shakers that are connected with the DCCCs and plugged into that.
Partisan folks.
The partisan people. So you got Nakima Williams, who is a sister who is Congresswoman John Lewis's seat, who is also the chair of the Democratic Party, who also comes out of domestic workers and led the C4, and just an amazing sister who is leading some of the who's in the partisan space, as well as Stacey. Stacey also sits in the partisan space as well, and then there are other sisters that sit in that partisan space. Then you got this layer of sisters who are literally leading even in the nonprofit space, like the nonprofit, the C3 table, which is called Pro Georgia, is led by a sister named Tamika Atkins. And so she's been doing a lot to try to coordinate a lot of the groups that are at the table, but each of the groups have their own work that they've been leading. For example, Helen has been doing coalition work outside of Metro Atlanta for the longest. She's in some of those counties and cities that folks don't know, right? So
dealing with voter and doing a lot around the voter protection.
And a lot around the voters, right. Around a lot of the voter protection work. You've got the sister, I can't think of her name right now, the Georgia Budget and Policy, that they've literally been helping us really tap into some of the data stuff. You've got this layer of nonprofit.
Georgia Stand Up.
You got Georgia Stand Up and Deborah Scott, who's been doing a lot of the work really in Metro Atlanta on the NPU level, the local level. And they've been doing phone banking and a lot of the kind of education piece. You got Rhonda Ridley, who is actually an operative who is the National Social Action Chair for Delta Sigma Theta, who is activated. Let me tell you something, them Delta sisters up in Georgia on fire. Like they would call us, they couldn't even finish their list good. They was like, what else you got? We was like, Lord have mercy. Like the sisters have been throwing down. And so she's been
a little commercial break there. Woo-hoo.
That's right. And so those sisters have been throwing down, but she's also not just been occupying the space of Delta, she's also been coordinating the Divine Nine.
The Divine Nine.
The Divine Nine has been working really closely together and kind of in that space. And then you've got folks who are literally kind of doing space on the peripheral that don't necessarily engage in politics, but they're leading the work on the social justice, like Mary Hooks, who leads Song. You got Georgia Engage. You got Sister Song. You got these other groups that are on the forefront of doing social justice work and movement building work, who are also leading in this space too. So it's really interesting. It's like the activist community. And so I think some of that, it's almost like Melanie said, a lot of that, I think that there's a coordination on some level of we all talk to each other, right? There's a larger tent, but I think that there's different phases, there's different parts of the work that people are taking lead in.
Well, I have to ask this question because I don't know the composition of many of these organizations, but where are the men?
Oh, well, I would tell you what's a man is. I worked with one. Cliff Albright worked harder than anybody I knew in this election. And so let me say this. Black men showed up for against Trump higher than any other constituency group in this country, with the exception of Black women. I'm saying that because we lose sight of it. There's a narrative, but 80%, there's nobody that came close to the number of Black men. Right. And so the bottom line is the brothers are showing up. 80% of the brothers are showing up. And I got one that I'm going to lift up, and I want people to lift them up. Cliff Albright has been working, I'm telling y'all, 16 to 18 hours a day, every day for the last 4 years. I'm telling you, I'm saying that because
what organization is he with?
Black Voters Matter. He's my partner.
And
he's also the executive director and co-founder. I'm raising that because in this space of lifting up the work of the women, it is not at the expense of marginalizing the work of the brothers.
No, it's not. It may not be at the expense of marginalizing them, but I sat here and listened and was very, very captivated by what you were saying. I'm so proud. I don't know what to do. But it did strike me that it was this sister that and this sister that. So I was like, okay, well, I know the men are doing it.
Well, as sisters, that's what we have to do. So this is nothing against the brothers. And I tell the brothers all the time.
We have to lift the sisters up.
You know, we got to do what we got to do. And owning our power is not just our vote. It's owning our leadership. It's not. And I less and less care about hurting people's feelings. And that's probably because I'm just getting older, right? Getting more like my mama.
What you trying to say about us?
I'm just saying, you know, but brothers, I say you gotta own your power. Don't let the narrative. I think the one thing that as we were going through this election cycle, you know, I'd run into a couple brothers and said, well, what about the brothers? I'm like, y'all got
tell the story.
Lead it. Don't you buy into the narrative. Because when sisters in the room, we're not sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to not support the brothers. That is totally not the conversation, right? But the narrative can get out there like that. And I'm like, look, you got to own it, right? And so,
I agree. I do think we have to own it, but I also think we do have to share part of the story, because I think that's what the men did to us. The men allowed that narrative to go forward that excluded us, and they didn't do anything. They didn't say anything.
And I agree with that. That's why, at least for us, you know, we did as many things as we could.
Absolutely.
Do that throughout the cycle.
That's right.
You know, we had our Black women's power table, brothers, but lead.
Right.
I can't be behind. I'm not going to do the work. Now, this is what I'm not going to do. The work, and then hand you a mic. That's right. I'm not going to do.
That's right.
I'm going to set you and get you set up so that you have the ability, you have the resources, and you all have to, and then there's have collectively, but Dr. Cole was on one of the sister calls, and she was just like, somebody was talking earlier on, you know, back in I think late August, or before I went to the hospital, right? So it had to be late August. Somebody brought up something, and it was just like, shut it down. No, we're not going to write the letter. They got to write their own letter, right? But we need you to write that letter to speak up for the sister and say that you believe, brothers, that Kamala Harris should be.
But that happened, and that is happening because we refuse to do it.
That's all. That's the lesson I've learned over these years. You know, that no, I'm going to provide the space. I'm going to provide the resources, but you will do the work.
Well, let me tell you something about that incident.
That's being real about how things would be.
I just want us to get in front of the narrative. If 80% of Black men,
I'm there.
I'm not saying you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying so we share the narrative, because that's not the narrative.
I agree with that.
Right. There's nobody that came close.
It may not be the narrative, and I do understand it was 80%, but I'm still pissed off that it was 18 who didn't. I think it's something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be fixed. We got to figure it out and deal with it. So even though 80% did, 92% of us did it.
And you know, and the reality of the targeting of young,
because they were right.
You know, the targeting of how to. It's not something we've always had to deal with, and so some of the new ways of suppression that comes through these, you know. These and what people get and anything, if you constantly hearing it, it does affect you. That's anybody.
And I do want to say two quick things with this, Cora, and I'll that part of also what happened and the frustration even with men, that at the end of the day, white folks have always found a way to exploit Black pain. And so the truth of the matter is, there are some brothers that are out there in pain. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not making an excuse, just like we in pain, right? But I'm saying that part of what happened, there was a targeted effort that literally was to exploit the pain of Black men, right? And to really be able to go in there. There were two factors I think we're going to have to unpack. One is the exploitation of Black pain, and then the other is about toxic masculinity. That at the end of the day, there is a element around this masculine figure that is the Scarface factor, what I call. Like, we like the bully, we like the man that'll cuss somebody, that'll get over, or I running the street, using this enormous amount of abuse of power. And so there is an element even in our community that kind of personality, like that Donald Trump has, that bully personality, that there's an element in our community that's actually attracted to that. And that's a larger issue that we're going to have to uproot, because that's the same thing that drives the domestic violence in our community. That's the same thing that drives some other elements. So I just think that there has to be an unpacking of why in the world at this stage would you be attracted to a man that lines himself up with a group that actually don't believe that will inflict violence on Black folks with white supremacist groups. So I don't disagree.
I don't disagree with you 100%. But when you get through with all of that, and it will be, it has been, and will always have to be unpacked, I still come down at, how could you be so damn gullible? It hurts me that I know they had operatives on the ground in the community promoting this. I know this was all targeted. I know this, but what breaks my heart is it was targeted at us too, but we didn't bite.
But Cora,
and I know they got a whole history, a whole Black man history. Trust me, I've heard it for 70 years. And I'm saying that it puts us at a place that we have a lot of work to do. And I don't know how much we can get done, because on top of all of that also was misogyny. Don't just leave out about their pain, but also their dissatisfaction that it was a woman, a Black woman. So it got lots of issues, and it could have destroyed us.
Absolutely. What I will say, Cora, though, I'm gonna be honest. When we went to Detroit, and we were in Philly, there were brothers, I got it on video, that there were brothers that we would talk to that would go up there, was like, oh, no, I ain't voting because such and such and such. And they would tell us like the bullet points, right? We would know that they heard the bullet points.
Right.
It took us maybe 10 minutes just to sit there and listen to them and talk to them. Next thing I know, they was like, give me that paper to register. There is something, we're going to have to own this too. There is an element of that. There is a gap in who is actually tailoring a message to really talk to Black men in a certain way. I'm not making an excuse for them. I'm just saying that I can give you examples where literally it took us maybe 10 minutes to these brothers that claim that they weren't going to vote, that by the time we finished, they was like, give me the paper. And it wasn't even to the point where I remember saying, I said, it ain't really that hard. What is happening is that we're not talking. There's been so much focus on super voters that there's an undervote in our community that people are not talking to. And they're making, in the absence, in that vacuum, they're grabbing hold of this information. They're going with that information in the vacuum.
I understand that. I know that more than probably most people. I get it. I studied it. I've worked in it. I get it. And when it's all done and said, it's a lot of things. It's just not unpacking that pain. There's a whole thing with Black men in this country. And this is just a manifestation of the dysfunctionality of how they are functioning in our world. It's not just that they voted for Trump, but whatever it was that drove them to do it, I don't know if we can solve it. I was involved with young men from the age of 16, because I run the center, 18, and all the way to 20, 23, 24. And I had all of those conversations with a lot of those young men, including my grandnephew. When I got a hit swift that he was talking, somebody heard it on the street, he in Florida. Child, I reached through them blinds, I grabbed him, I said, ooh, you got to just, wait a minute, we got to talk. And I had to go deep with him, but so I get it. I get it. But that being said, we're going to need a vote. in Georgia, what you gonna do? You gonna sit with them? What you gonna do to get their vote? What you gonna do?
We've been doing it. We've been
it's hard enough to get people. Black folks don't do runoffs well. My brother was the mayor of Riviera Beach down in Florida, and anytime he had a runoff, we had to go double hard to get people to go back. They don't like to go back twice. So my question is, how are we gonna get them to go back, and who is who's going to be dispatching our painful black brothers? And that's a conversation we can pick up.
I'm just going to lift up Montgomery, Alabama. Let me tell you what we did in Montgomery. We did this in Louisiana, but we did this in Montgomery. Montgomery, Alabama has their first African-American mayor ever in the history they got this year. That there was in the election, there were several candidates. It was a bitter election. Well, it was an intense election, and Montgomery has an awful history around runoffs. We literally decided to focus on a message that was beyond the candidate about consolidating Black support. Look at the numbers. We had more Black folks to vote in the runoff than voted in the primary. That is unheard of, right? Part of that, what I'm saying, there's an element that the just good old fashioned getting on the ground, talking to folks, people have abandoned that as a strategy, right? And then you layer that with a communication strategy and a media strategy, it works. And so I'm just saying that in that city, what we had seen in the last 20 years is that all of the work on the ground was candidate centered.
So are you going to use that strategy for now?
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying. That's great. And Melanie, we're getting ready to, before we sign off, you want to say something else? Because this is
I had a great time tonight.
This is another show. You
Right?
and, we can do this all day.
I love this. I love this. This is part of my highlight. Or if I'm not on, I'm loving listening and the conversations that we have to have. And so I'm just glad to be here. And hey, we gotta do what we gotta do. And looking for January 5th to be a non-partisanly speaking a
great show up for the vote
shift.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
We're all gonna do everything we can to make that happen.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Latasha. Do y'all promise to come back? Because we got to finish this conversation. All right, Munson, you want to take us out?
I want to thank everyone for coming to Nothing New Under the Sun. Latasha Brown, true warrior there, her and her partner, who I just want to say thank you. I just want to say to Miss Cora Masters-Berry, the continuation of intergenerational conversation is important, that we recognize that we are an entire community. There are no bigs, littles in the Black community. It is one Black community. And the more we recognize us as a community, we will know that our culture is in our love for each other, and that's all of us. And we want and should demand that all boats rise as it relates to our community. So thanks, Miss Cora Masters-Berry. The language we must use is we, our, and us. If we are not talking about the we, and the our, and the us, and they, we allow them to kind of dissuade us from being able to be a cohesive coalition of Blackness. Do not be afraid in this moment to say it. We recognize the true attributes of all Black women who have been here for years, suffering, struggling, and persevering. This is a moment for us all to recognize that we should use the language of we. Because the more we alienate ourselves, the more they use it as a divisive tool to continue to take the ignorant and make them look and vote against themselves. This is Munson Steve for Nothing New Under the Sun. You do not have to be in the streets, but you must be in the struggle. We'll see you next Tuesday here on Nothing New Under the Sun. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Thank you, Cora.